All right. Welcome everyone to our Q&A with Qlik webinar series. Happy summer to all of you, or I guess winter if you're in other parts of the world. We are so excited to have all of you with us today for our July session, where we'll talk about making that transition from QlikView to Qlik Sense. This webinar is a live question and answer session. If you're a returning audience member, you might have seen us refer to it as our live office hours with our expert panelists. We want you to use this time to ask questions on today's topic and hopefully get to know some of the good people here at Qlik a little bit more. I'm Katie Davis, and I'll be your moderator for this session. I'm a community program manager bringing support-related events like these to our users, working on various digital channels on Qlik Community. You might have seen me posting on our support updates blog. That's another great place to get support and product news. I'm located outside of Philadelphia, which is along the East Coast of the United States. And before I introduce our panelists, I'll go over a few of our session parameters. So everyone is currently on mute, and we ask you to type your questions in the Q&A panel below. We will not necessarily be using the panel to type out a response to your questions, as we plan to speak to them all live today. Our survey link will pop up when the session is ended. It's also linked in this presentation, so be sure to complete it. It takes 10 seconds. We also plan to email the link out with the recording. So we love when you guys send us topic suggestions. It makes my job a lot easier. So go ahead and email those ideas to digital@qlik.com. Topic suggestions can also be included when you register. And we just added our next 4 monthly sessions out on our registration page. So go ahead and check it out. Sign up, or even better, subscribe, and you'll get notifications each month when a session is about to start. So now back to today's session, what's called This and That, QlikView to Qlik Sense. We ask that you keep the questions relative to the topic at hand. And just so you know, we have the best experts on the line, our Qlik experts, but we will not be able to answer those questions regarding a specific open case. So without further ado, I'll go into our great lineup of panelists. Thank you all for joining us today and giving us some of your time. So I'll list them off, and then you guys can go ahead and introduce yourselves after. We have, and in no particular order, we have Adrian Harvey, a global customer success manager, Lance Anderson, a senior principal technical architect, Walter Spuntoff, a principal consultant, and Paula Bustos, a customer success team lead. So let's continue in that order. Adrian, you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Katie, and good to meet you all. So I'm approaching 10 years at Qlik later on this July, so somewhat of a veteran, and also, of course, means I've been here through a lot of the transitions we've made as a business, including, of course, QlikView to Qlik Sense. In my role now as a global SaaS CSE stands for Customer Success Engineering team. I manage a team of customer success engineers, and their primary focus is on helping customers as they navigate not just from QlikView to Qlik Sense, but also more recently from our on-premise platform to our SaaS platform. So, yep, good to meet you all, and looking forward to the questions and answers.
Great, thanks. All right, Lance, looks like you're up.
Lance Anderson. I'm a recovering Microsoft certified systems engineer, so I don't participate in that anymore. I've been with Qlik for about 35 password changes, so it's been not quite as long as Adrian, but I've been around for a while. I'm an infrastructure wonk. I primarily do architecture, design, discovery, help customers build out their infrastructure and figure out what and how much resource they need to support what they're trying to achieve. Happy to be here. Happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you. All right, Walter, you're next.
Lance, I have to say, 35 password changes. I can really feel that.
It's a long time, you know?
Yeah. I think I've been only through 29. But no, I'm Walter Spontoff. I'm a principal consultant. In English, that means that I generally lead development efforts. So I will work with developers where they are Qlik resources, contractors, or customer resources to, I call it, provide adult supervision to make sure things are done right in a quality way that are not going to break the bank in future releases. So I help you stay out of things as well as fixing things that are problem areas. And as I said, I've been 29 password changes translates into about 7 years.
Great, thank you for that conversion. All right, Paula, certainly not least, but last in this order. Go ahead, start us off.
Hello, everybody. So I have been in Qlik not so long, only 1.5 years. I manage the customer success team for the analytics modernization program. So we basically help the customers to do this transition from QlikView to Qlik Sense during 6 months. I'm happy to be here today, and hopefully we can answer most of the questions that you might have.
That's great. All right, so we have some questions that we scoured across Qlik community to find to help answer for everyone who's on this call. But if you joined, we hope that you have questions of your own. So go ahead and put that in the Q&A panel below. You can just type it in and we'll answer as we go. But I'll go ahead and start us off and ask some of the questions we found, which the first one is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of Qlik Sense and QlikView? Can you differentiate between the two? So who wants to take a whack at that one first?
I can start with that one.
Okay, go ahead.
They're the same, but different. Okay, so you still have the associative engine. So you have the in-memory, the great performance, the flexibility in terms of how you look at things. But the thing you have to realize is that QlikView is very much a Windows desktop product. And one of the things that QlikView developers love about it is that you can control every single aspect of how it looks and behaves. The bad news is you will spend a ton of time doing exactly that. And then it's essentially proprietary technology. So, you're limited in flexibility. So, now that people don't have just the one screen at their desktop where you can say, oh, okay, what size are we making this at? Now, all of a sudden, you can run it on a multitude of devices. The other thing is that Qlik Sense is a web native product. So as you really see this primarily in the SaaS side more than anywhere else, where it's easily integrated with other systems and new features can be brought in. And because in the SaaS environment, you don't have to stand up a physical server or even a virtual server for every new capability. You have the ability to start adopting these things when they're relatively new and without the baggage of having to go through that whole requisition process. It's just there. You can start using it. So I think that's kind of general, but I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah, I'll probably jump in. The thing I'd probably add is that, as an organization, QlikView is a product that's, I think it was launched in 1993. I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong on that piece, but it's there you go. So it's built on a technology that's obviously changed during that time quite dramatically. And as Walter pointed out, Qlik Sense is built very much on web technologies. For obvious reasons, that allows us to integrate with many more of the systems that you're using. But equally, as an organization, Qlik, when we look at our roadmap, we still look to maintain and develop a roadmap for QlikView. But ultimately, a lot of the changes we're making to the products now, a lot of the additional features we're bringing into the products, they do tend to sit more on the Qlik Sense side. So when we think about a reason why we want to start thinking about that transition across to Qlik Sense is because it will allow you to open up to a lot more use cases within your business that you're going to get a lot more value from if you think about the outcomes that you can actually receive by starting to use Qlik Sense as a product within your business. If I think about things like data alerting, data lineage, even in terms of how you would move Qlik Sense apps to the cloud, that's not necessarily for today's topic, but it is something that you need to think about when we think about that longer term roadmap, of you as a Qlik customer. So that's the other thing I'd think about is just, as an organization, our roadmap is very much focused around our Qlik Sense product.
Yep. If I can, just the QlikView is very much, I don't want to call it legacy, but it is a legacy product. It's something that is fairly simple to develop in terms of, if you're a Power Excel developer, you can kind of create in QlikView fairly easily, but you are also limited in the Windows desktop kind of functionality, right? Development from that perspective, you require a QlikView desktop installation. The Qlik Sense is much more extensible, gives you the ability to do that server-based development where you're not limited by resources, whatever's on your desktop, laptop, that kind of thing. So, you have that kind of functionality, but we're still catching up in the Qlik Sense to all of the functionality and feature set that QlikView had, of course, because it's had, 28, 29 years of development to come to fruition, right? So that's kind of the good and the bad on both sides. But to sum it all up, I mean, Qlik Sense is giving you that true web experience and that extensibility. And as the feature sets are developed, some of them are not quite possible to implement in the QlikView just because of its desktop nature. So.
All right, thank you all. I'm also sharing my screen. On our help.qlik.com site, right on the top ribbon, if you go over to the right, there's a migration center, and it is text heavy, but we have a lot of written detail around comparing QlikView and Qlik Sense. And I think, Paolo, you were saying that you direct customers this way when they're thinking about or planning or starting to do their migration. So we'll share that link across as well. All right. So I'll jump into the next question. We have a QlikView QVD, which our business wants to use for Qlik Sense. How can we make them available in Qlik Sense?
I guess I'll take this one too.
All right, go ahead.
A QVD is a QVD. There's no difference in terms of what generated it. So really, it's just a matter of physical access. So if you have your network permissions, and I'll defer to Lance on that, if you have your network permissions set up, you can have a folder connection from QlikView to Qlik Sense, and you just read it like any other QVD over the network.
Yeah, so because they're like Walter said, a QVD is a QVD. As long as you have network access, and that could be as simple as just a folder share, you can leverage and reuse those QlikView generated QVDs. They could reside in the same location. You just need to be able to make them accessible from your Qlik Sense environment. You can create tasks, using the external task feature in QlikView to then call maybe a command file, a batch command that will copy those files to a new network location and make them available to Qlik Sense. There's a variety of ways to achieve it, but the bottom line is because they are a QVD is a QVD and you can leverage them in both products, as long as they are reachable by the Qlik Sense environment, they're available and able to be used.
Great, thank you. Now, for those who are joining in, just wanted to remind you to put your questions in the Q&A panel below. We're going to be answering them live. But to segue off of what you were just saying, Lance, on tasks, our next question is how can we build the daily refresh task the same in Qlik Sense as it was in QlikView?
So, I mean, there's a couple of questions that are going to go around that question, right? Is what exactly does that mean? But from the most simplistic standpoint, If you have a daily task that reloads a final app from QBDs, you just build it in the task scheduler section of the QMC in Qlik Sense, the same as you would in QlikView. If you are leveraging a ETL process and you need to use QBD generator apps and have tiers and link those tasks together, you could certainly do that the same kind of functionality as you do in QlikView. It doesn't quite look the same with the steps out and the tiers in QlikView as it does in Qlik Sense. You don't have that. It's kind of just they have like a little paperclip icon that shows their linked tasks, but you can create tasks in Qlik Sense the same way to run daily or hourly or however often you want them to be triggered or triggered by another task kind of thing, same as you would in QlikView.
Okay, great, thank you. And William is asking us, is there a limit of number of file or size we can upload into Qlik Sense Saas? So Saas specifically. Are you guys aware of that?
So with Qlik Sense Saas, there is a slightly different model in terms of what we call our capacity model. We have different tiers of application size that you can have, from 5 gig being the standard, and then we have what's called extended or dedicated capacity. So there are some limitations around the size of file that you would have. Obviously, with it being now a proper SaaS-based platform, we need to think about how we manage application size, on that basis. But yeah, there are some limitations. I would say limitations because ultimately it just depends on which tier of capacity you put those applications into. But it's all documented, and I can share a link with that. One thing I would say, and this is very much a roadmap statement, those I mentioned the standard capacity at the moment is 5 gig. We are looking to remodel that later this quarter, so you will start to see those sizes increase. But that's something I'm more than happy to have a follow-up if required. But I'll share a link in the chat window for that now.
Thank you. All right. Someone is asking here, if we currently have QlikView, why would we move to Qlik Sense instead of utilizing something like Power BI or Tableau? Well, I wish we had our sales guys on the call. I will say out on Qlik.com, there is a lot of referencing, comparing us and other products in the industry. And you can look at like Gartner reviews and things as well. Does anyone want to maybe go into the details between the two specifically? Was it Lance that you said you were from Microsoft?
So, I mean, if you're already leveraging QlikView and you're experiencing the power of the associative in-memory engine, and you've developed in QlikView and you have load scripts which can be leveraged and reused in Qlik Sense, why would you re-engineer that to move to a new platform versus leveraging the extensibility and the power of the Qlik Sense platform, which is a true web app, which is going to give you that kind of drill down data access to go from summary to detail in that powerful linked or associated memory model. There's a lot to answer and unpack there, but it's don't think of QlikView to Qlik Sense as migrating from product to product. It's more old product to new version of product that's much more web native, much more capable, and much more extensible. So that's kind of how I would answer that without diving into the details.
And just to add on to that, one of the things that is easy to overlook is, you look at something else and say, oh, this has this feature that I really need. And you can very easily forget about what the current environment is actually doing for you that you rely on. So as Lance mentioned, in your QlikView environment, you have this whole ETL process. It's been defined. It's been tried over time. It's been refined. It works. If you get something like Tableau or Power BI, now all of a sudden you're going to have to rethink your entire approach, and all of the underpinnings of your BI strategy will need to be reworked, and that's expensive.
And I'll say, as a recovering end user, before I joined Qlik, I was working for one of the big banks here in the US, and I've used our competitors before, and when I've moved to Qlik and actually was using the product, I was really impressed with how comprehensive it was. So while the other ones work, they work when you also buy it and link it with another software as a service company, or there's a lot of layering in that. And just from even doing these sessions before, I've been looking at, our lineage connectors and our application automation and all the pieces that come with the Qlik suite is really a way to dive into your data even more. Uncover those insights.
And I guess just final point for me on this one is very much, there's strands of what we've been talking through here, but it's that whole kind of total cost of ownership piece. I think with some of those other products, there's a suggestion that they may be free at the point of use, but you really need to look at what the longer term plan for those products is. With some you may be able to get up and running slightly quicker, but actually the longer term value isn't quite as realizable. And equally, with some of those products, they're very complex to set up and then to maintain. Again, there's a link to an article which I'm going to share in the Q&A panel that will just cover off some of those TCO statements and some studies that we've done against the two products that were referenced in the question.
I realized I was on mute. Just a slow silence for everyone, but let me repeat myself. Someone's asking, does Qlik have resources to help with onboarding? Yes, the question is, what are you onboarding with? So are you either an administrator that is doing installment and deployment? We have different resources for that, versus if you're an end user, we have a lot of great learning paths on learning.qlik.com for business analysts and things like that. And we also have some playbooks of whether you're moving from like Qlik Sense on Windows to Qlik Sense Saas, or QlikView to Qlik Sense. So if you let us know, we'll try to get the right resource out to you. I'll also share some navigation pieces on Qlik Community. This is really the place to either like crowdsource your questions or find a lot of our knowledge how-to articles. So if you come to community.qlik.com and log in with your Qlik ID, you can create a Qlik account right on Qlik Community. It opens up some more spaces than if you were to just view it from not logging in. You can go into our forums and you can talk to like-minded people who are new to Qlik Sense, or you can search our knowledge base article. And member articles are articles that are written by you guys who love and use Qlik. And then there's also support articles that have been vetted by our technical support engineers. And you can really look throughout either all of community or knowledge base specifically for different deployment questions.
Can I add something to that, Katie?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so for the customers that join the Analytics Modernization program, so they get an onboarding specialist assigned to them. So that's what my team is doing currently. So we help the customer for 6 months to start this transition from QlikView to Qlik Sense specifically. So if you are a direct customer with Qlik and you join this program, you will get this onboarding specialist for free. That's going to help you with resources, guidance, and all these kind of things also during this transition.
And how would they, if they're interested in joining that program, how should they find that?
Well, we have a sales team for Analytics Modernization program, and probably they are going to contact the customer if they are good for this program, but it's like QlikView customers. All the QlikView customers are like entitled to this, to join this program.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And another question came through. Will my QlikView applications work in the Qlik Sense cloud? Do I need to make any changes for them to run in the cloud? Well, that's a big question. Maybe we can provide some commentary on how they can look at their applications and analyze, what needs to be done before moving.
I can take a first stab at that. And I'm sure Walter and Lance might want to jump in with some of the more technical details. But from a distribution point, yes, you can sort of publish your QlikView applications to the cloud. The question then really is about what is in those applications and whether they're compatible with our SaaS platform. Now, if you've got, for example, applications that have some extensions, old extensions, customized extensions, then it's quite likely that those won't necessarily be supported. So there may be different ways that you would need to think about replacing those objects in your applications. And the move to cloud is one that I think, Katie, we could probably have a dedicated session to at some stage in the not too distant future. But the move to cloud is one that needs to be thought out. It's not a simple lift and shift. It is something that needs to be thought through in terms of how we get access to how users can get access to the cloud and how we manage applications from the platform. It's different from what you see in QlikView or even Qlik Sense client managed. But in theory, yes, you can publish those applications, but you would need to see how they're published from the cloud platform, because there will be some no doubt extensions or other ways that you've developed those apps that may not be compatible. I don't know, Walter or Lance, if you want to add anything in addition to that.
Well, QlikView application is such a broad term, and considering that early when I was working with Qlik as a product, as a customer, I committed my share of QlikView atrocities. And there are just apps out there that, if you breathe on them the wrong way, they're going to break. So, a poor performing app in its native environment is one thing. But then when you try to move it to another environment, there may be some incompatibilities in terms of, I'm a firm believer that sometimes things work by accident. And, we saw that a lot in QlikView 11. So if you were using QlikView 11, you converted to 12, and all of a sudden you found that your load scripts were breaking, it's because some of the rules got tightened up, because, instead of this hodgepodge of things that had been developed over the years, there was an engine rewrite. And when you rewrite things, you clean them up and you tighten up the rules. So, it's your mileage may vary. If you have a clean, well-designed QlikView app, yes, it should migrate. But if you have something that is doing all kinds of bizarre things that were developed, 10 years ago and no one really understands how they work, it might be bumpy.
Yeah, I mean, just along with that, with the significant cleanup that was done, where changes in, how we interpret single quote, double quote, apply map changes, the differences between the disabling of the BNF, bringing QlikView directly into SaaS, again, while possible in certain cases in a perfect world, it's definitely an opportunity to re-examine what exactly you're doing and determining if that's the best path forward.
All right, thank you, everyone. All right, William, thank you for all your questions. And I think maybe we'll even have Paolo reach out to you after this as you're asking more about those onboarding packages that we provide. Do you want to just speak, Paolo, to everyone about some more of like what exactly is done during that process?
Yes, sure. So what we do is to be like a guidance for the customer during 6 months of this transition. So the first 6 months of this. So when they join the AMP program, they close the deal, and after this, we help them with this migration process. So we have a onboarding process with resources, best practices, and these kind of things to guide the customer. Just to clarify, we are not technical, so we don't do like the development part. We are not going to migrate the app for the customer, but we are going to guide the customer and explain them how they need to do this. So we also have helped a lot of customers doing this process. So we have some experience and so knowledge, so we can do recommendations to the customer on how to start this process. In the case that the customer has like more technical or deep questions, we also can make these questions internally in Qlik, find the right answer, and then go back to the customer. So what we usually do is to have a lot of meetings with the customers to understand what they want to do, how they want to do this migration, how many time they have, how many resources internally they have to do this. And then we like advise the customer and we help them during this period of time. That's the basic explanation, but of course I can contact William, I think, after this webinar to explain him and give him more details about the process.
Yeah, and William, we have the email that you registered with. We'll reach out to you with that resource, and I'll try to send across some other onboarding resources as well. But another question that I think will probably benefit everyone that William asked is, we've been using QlikView since 2008, over 14 years. So thank you for being a long-standing customer, William. We like it a lot. My boss asked me to migrate everything to Qlik Sense Saas this summer. My preference is to keep the best of both product for now. What is your suggestion? I'm a bit nervous moving everything to Saas, new territory for me. Well, I want to validate that it is completely normal to be nervous. that's an undertaking, and hopefully we can help kind of direct you on where to start. So who wants to respond to William on that?
I mean, I'll take a first stab at it. I'm sure again, Lance and William can jump in on the technical side. But I think, without William, without knowing how many applications, how many users, the size of your existing, client managed platform, it's hard to give you a full assessment in what is a short call. So in terms of that follow-up, I'd be keen to sort of join that as well, because as well as the onboarding piece, of course, we have various services outcomes that can support you from a technical perspective too. But from my perspective, when we think about QlikView to Qlik Sense conversion or migration, it's important maybe to kind of stop feeding or stop increasing the QlikView applications. I think at some point you need to ring fence that platform, and any new development should start to happen in Qlik Sense. If that's where the future is and that's where the roadmap is going to sort of start to be built out from, then that would be my recommended sort of first step. And then as you start to develop those Qlik Sense applications, and of course your users, the different personas within your organization will start to understand the difference. Because again, one of the things we maybe didn't mention at the start of the first question about the differences is that Qlik Sense is really a product to really start to help organizations move more towards this self-serve paradigm. So rather than going through a typical business case to a developer builds an application, it goes back to the business user, is trying to empower and enable a group of users to start developing insights for themselves, because in doing that, we bring more agility into the organization. So that's one thing to consider. But from the QlikView side, then it really is a case of looking at those applications, prioritizing them. It is an opportunity, to William's point, to really kind of look at those apps and see, if you've got 50, how many are actually being used, and we can help with that. We have some assessment tools that we can kind of run against your platforms to see which of the QlikView and Qlik Sense applications are ready to move to SaaS, of your QlikView estate, which ones are not being used in any great earnest, and therefore, maybe it's time to retire some of those apps rather than just recreate them in Qlik Sense and just have them there as another option. So there's lots of strands to that to that question. Hopefully, I've put some structure around it in terms of how I've answered it. But really, it does come down a lot to the size of your current implementations, and as I say, that longer term plan. Because what we don't know is whether you have SaaS licensing now, whether you're already an AMP customer, which is what Paula's just been talking through. But hopefully that gives you some food for thought. And again, Lance, William, Walter, sorry, I'm not sure if there's anything you'd add to that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of spot on, right? It's all going to depend. It's a big question mark. I think you probably have a good plan in the sense that keeping the best of both products, there's going to be things that are not going to translate well that you may need. If you have some QlikView apps that are leveraging some macros or something that are not going to translate to SaaS very well, you may have to keep those into the QlikView product for the time being until we come up with an alternative solution. you know, it really does come down to how many apps are you moving. As Adrian said, it's an excellent opportunity to sort of sort through and identify. If you've been using QlikView for 14 years, that's a long time. There's likely some legacy stuff in there that, you know, was built 14 years ago and may or may not have relevant value today that, you know, you don't necessarily want to move into the new environment. So, you know, first place is going to be starting with an assessment and leveraging the tools to identify which of these will move well, what your user base is going to look like. Are you going to be adding new users in? Is the expectation that new users, a new block of business unit is going to be going SaaS while the other users are still going to maintain and QlikView? There's a lot of unanswered questions there.
Okay.
But we'd be happy to help guide that process.
Yes. Thank you all for that commentary. I think it really helps someone who's looking to start out on this journey. So we have a great question here. Someone's asking, I've heard that Qlik Sense is more self-service, business user friendly, but is anything sacrificed in making that so? Will developers notice a watered down experience?
Oh, I love this one. No, it's here's the thing is, it all depends on how you think about your user base. So, you know, a lot of what people did in QlikView were trying to control every aspect of the user experience. And the orientation in Qlik Sense is more, let the users figure out what they want and have some ability to do things. So, like the master items. And the way that I'll approach that is, you know, someone brought up like the QlikView converter at one point. And I'm not a big fan of the QlikView converter for apps that have been around for a long time, because what I've seen is you'll wind up with like 6 or 8 different variations of the same dimension. And they may be called different things. And one of the things that Qlik Sense enables you to do is to define these master items. And they can have tags and descriptions so that if people wanted to build things themselves, they have a little bit more guidance in terms of how to do that. So, you know, I've gone through several of these conversions, and there's really a big shift in how people approach things. The one thing I see a lot in QlikView implementations is it's an easy way of getting your data into a table, and then they export, and then they do whatever they want with the data. And, you know, that makes me sad because they're missing out on some of the best capabilities. So, you know, in the newer model with Qlik Sense, where you have these governed metrics, where, you know, a dimension means one thing throughout the entire app. And then you can have master items, which are measures. So you can have, you know, curated calculations in terms of how things should be calculated. And then if a user has is looking at a sheet of visualizations and they want to tweak it, they can make a copy of it. And then they can make whatever changes they want to that copy. And, you know, given that option, they love it. Now, for some of your developers, they may miss that sense of total control. And they may not like that because they liked doing all of the triggers and actions and macros and let me show you what I can make this thing do. But, you know, sometimes those very same things were used to cover up deficiencies in how the app was built. I've seen things that look like a genuine Qlik experience, but under the covers, it turns out that there are all these triggers and macros and actions making it look like it's an associative model, when it's really not. So that's kind of the long way around. And that is that it's not you're losing things. It's more like you have to change your approach in how you promote things to your user base. Any kind of change, you're going to have to do some sort of change management. I had one where we tried to absolutely duplicate their QlikView app as much as possible. And still, you know, the person on the other side, well, I'm going to have to retrain all my users. It's just different enough. And you don't know my users. Any kind of change. I mean, you change the color on one item, they need to be retrained. So, you know, it's more of give your users credit for being able to work with the data and give them the capabilities.
Yeah. And one of the things, like the question, will developers notice the watered down experience? I think it's almost the opposite, right? It's not watered down. It's almost sensory overload. There's so much more, I think, capability wise available to the developers in the Sense experience that it's you have a greater opportunity to really show some dynamic visualizations and leverage governed data in a prescribed manner. So I don't think it's going to be watered down experience. I think it's going to be very robust.
And now is when I'll do my shameless plug. So Q&A with Qlik, we also have a developer wing of this program. Our next session will be scheduled out in September. We've taken the summer off, but we have a few developer advocates as our panelists, and Jeff Goldberg, who is helping run that developer wing in our organization. So if you want to see how and what you can do with, you know, that more technical advanced work, go ahead and join those sessions and see anything you can do customization wise or using our source library languages. So go ahead and check us out. We have some recording ones out on the Q&A page. Okay. Now there's a question in here that I think we did answer. How can I assess my existing QlikView applications for compatibility with Qlik Sense? Maybe do we just want to speak to some of like the ones that are really easy to move over, and then some things that might cause more prep work?
Isn't there something in the QlikView governance dashboard?
I believe there is in the latest version, which is actually a few years old, in the governance dashboard. There's a, but I have to go back and look at it. I'm not sure if that's specific to Qlik Sense or Qlik Sense Saas. There's I think it might be the Saas analysis. There's definitely an app that will analyze your QlikView apps for the conversion to Qlik Sense Saas.
Right. So yeah, on a more granular basis, the things that are going to be problem areas. I don't know if there's a compatibility way of doing that, but I can tell you a couple of things. It looks like there's on the screen QlikView Apps and Qlik Sense.
Yeah, there's I'm looking through it. Sorry if you see.
Yeah, and no, you're hitting exactly on some of the things that where you have supported functionality and unsupported functionality.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, a lot of it's right there. So the things off the top of my head that I know are going to be issues for you are, you know, in QlikView, you have a lot of use of high density displays, you know, a lot of show hide, often you'll have overlaid objects or, you know, macros and triggers. Those two do not translate. We do have actions, but they're more limited, and actions are, you know, in general, a tricky thing to work with because they're great when you set them up, and they're a real nuisance when you discover, oh, well, it's going to run when I really don't want it to as well. So, you know, actions are just kind of like blunt instruments. So, yeah, I would say pay attention to this page, look at the danger items that are not supported, and then, kind of make that judgment from there.
All right, thank you. As we are getting closer to the second half, 15 minutes left in our session. So if you came to have your question answered and it hasn't been asked yet, go ahead and write it in the Q&A. And then I will continue to read the questions that we saw out there on Qlik Community. So this might be interesting since we're talking about what works in QlikView versus Qlik Sense. One of the questions is, I'm planning to migrate QlikView Apps to Qlik Sense. I have used multiple functions in building QlikView Apps and have Qlik End printing on demand for all my apps. May I know if there are any other limitations in Qlik Sense, business or SaaS, compared to QlikView, and steps to follow for migrating QlikView to Qlik Sense? So maybe this is the time where we can talk about the reporting features and functionality. For enterprise SaaS customers, we have Qlik reporting service, but does anyone want to speak to end printing and the differences between environments?
Yeah, again, there's a few different parts to this question. It talks about QlikView to Qlik Sense Apps, and then it also talks about moving to Qlik Sense Saas. Now, if we just look at that end printing piece, so as you move from QlikView to Qlik Sense, and if we just focus on the client managed side of this, then most of those end printing use cases are transferable or convertible, if that's the right terminology, and including the on-demand piece. You can do that within a Qlik Sense app client manager, as you can do within QlikView. So most of that functionality is maintained between the two products. The change comes from when we then look at that from a Qlik Sense SaaS perspective. So end printing as a product is not supported on our SaaS platform. What we are building in the SaaS platform is what we call our enterprise reporting service. So many of the use cases that you may be using end printing for, we're looking to bring into the platform, but ultimately it would mean them being done in a slightly different way. And we're already starting to release some of that capability in the Qlik SaaS platform now. But as a product, from an end printing perspective, that's not going to be a product that's supported within our Qlik Sense SaaS product.
And when you talk about end printing, that again is a very broad term. It can be something that's a very simple tabular report, or it could be something that's highly formatted and distributed on a regular basis. So the question's a little too broad for a firm answer, but no, end printing will work equally well with QlikView or Qlik Sense. So you can most likely, just move it right across with some sort of conversion of some kind in terms of data sources. And I don't know what version of end printing you're on and things like that. So there are some variables there.
I think also it's probably worth pointing out that when we think about how we integrate Qlik Sense SaaS as part of the platform within an organization, it doesn't have to be an and or an or. It shouldn't be thought of as an or a kind of a complete migration pathway. It can be something that can be brought in and integrated into the existing platform. So to that point, where you do have end printing use cases and ones that aren't necessarily supported right now in the product, again, it may be that there's better ways of doing it from the SaaS platform, but it could be that in those examples, you maintain some client managed applications to allow for those use cases to continue in the way that they're obviously adding value now. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be an all-in type discussion, because there are ways that actually SaaS can still add value. You can still relinquish some of the TCO benefits of moving to the cloud platform, such as reducing the amount of CPU and RAM that you're using to kind of support your existing on-premise platforms. So again, it's a very broad question, but ultimately it shouldn't be kind of a SaaS doesn't support end printing, therefore it can't be part of the roadmap.
All right, thank you. And Paula found a reporting from Qlik Cloud resource that I shared in the chat, and I'm sharing on my screen right here. That goes into reporting service. I'll ask another question along, getting data out of your instance. Can we display multiple screens side by side in Qlik Sense as we have multiple sheets view in QlikView presentation layer. I'm not familiar with the QlikView presentation layer, but I'm thinking maybe this is where we talk about like storytelling in Qlik Sense. Any thoughts? Am I going in the wrong direction with this?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay. They're looking to display, it looks like the multiple screens side by side. So like report and report all in one screen, like multiple charts. Are you aware of the QlikView presentation layer? Maybe that's
No, I'm not
okay.
sure what
they're talking about.
So I'm sorry. I just really
No,
have
that's okay.
fun.
That's okay. We'll look back at it. That was one of our community questions, so I'll follow back up on that post and get some more clarification. All right, let me see. Is it possible to make a QV task execute, or sorry, we're using acronyms. Is it possible to make a QlikView task execute a Qlik Sense task in another server?
Absolutely.
Oh, perfect.
It's pretty simple. Depends on how you want to do it. You can trigger it via an external task, just like you would a QMS EDX trigger, something like that. Qlik Sense is all open APIs, so there's a Qlik Sense task executable that's available in the community. You can write your own using the APIs to call a specific task and run it. There's a variety of ways to do it, but yes, it's absolutely doable.
All right, perfect. I'm doing a quick time check on the questions. It looks like we have about 8 minutes left. So if you guys want to keep asking your questions, go ahead, put it in the Q&A panel. I'll go through and share some resources and go through my final spiel at the end, but feel free to keep those questions coming and we'll try to get to them quickly. It looks like William wrote, Lance is referring to Qlik Sense. How about Qlik Sense Saas? So maybe tasks and servers at Saas, is there a difference?
So you're asking to trigger a Qlik Sense Saas task from QlikView?
Yeah.
I would imagine that's possible. There's the Qlik CLI, which is available for Qlik Sense Saas, which I would believe you can do that and leverage that to trigger. So the Qlik CLI command line interface is available to use that.
So what Qlik CLI is, Qlik Sense is very much API driven. So it's API first, and then everything else is built on top of that. So Qlik CLI is an open source PowerShell wrapper of the Qlik APIs. So if you're familiar with PowerShell, you can do that. I know there's some other Python-based wrappers, things like that. So really, the whole thing is the API is designed to give you that level of capability. The best place to follow up on that is the next session, which will be, the developer-based one, because they can certainly talk to you about how you would go about using the CLI or the API calls in order to achieve what you're looking for.
The short answer is yes. You can use the QlikView.
We're not doing short answers today, Lamb.
The short answer is yes, you can do that.
We still have a few minutes left. We're doing long answers.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, for your questions. I think we've had a great discussion today. This session is being recorded and it'll be available for us out on Qlik Community. So you'll see my screen now is showing Qlik Community. You can find this program under the support navigation bar under programs. Here we are right there, Q&A with Qlik. If I click into it, which give my computer some time, it's been working really hard lately. You can see the past recordings are all out here. And when you go into the recording, you can look at all the questions that are listed and really just click to the question that you want an answer for. So it's all linked in here. You can also find Qlik support out on YouTube. We have a lot of Qlik fix videos and quick how-to videos as well. I'll also highlight Techspert Talks. This is run by my colleague Troy. And it is, if this is our live office hours, Techspert Talks is our like show and tell is the best way to describe it. They do a demo of a product or feature, go through some best practices, and then there's a short question and answer at the bottom of that. Again, feel free to email digital@qlik.com if you want to hear more about a certain topic or feature. Seems like we'll definitely have a cloud one coming up based off of a lot of the questions. I'll take that CLI topic off to Jeff, and maybe we'll bring it back for the developer series in the fall. Other things to point out on community, we have a support updates blog, so go ahead and subscribe there. That's where you'll get a lot of the key updates. And then last but not least, I'll say our ideation piece out here on Qlik Community. If there's a product feature request that you have that you're not seeing currently, ask us. And the ones that get the most attention will most likely be in development, or we'll work through ways to get those features to you. But Qlik Community is a great resource for all of your Qlik needs, and it's a great way to get in touch with other people in the same boat as you. And then of course help.qlik.com has a lot of this I'd say like overview text for you to look at as you go into planning any kind of conversions or transition, migration, whatever you want to do with your Qlik environment next. So with that, I think we're out for all questions. I'll say our next Q&A topic, let me go to it right now. You can get out your phones to do a QR code, is Qlik visualizations. It's been a while since we've had this one, so I'm excited. That's all the flashy fun stuff that you get to do with Qlik. So we'll have a good session then. And then I think we have Qlik Replicate coming up. We have all the new sessions out there, so go ahead and check us out. And then of course, before you sign off, go ahead and do our survey. We really appreciate having you here. We really appreciate the engagement. Thank you to all our panelists for giving us your time today. I hope we have you back soon.
Thanks, Katie.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good one, everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks so.